Hi, this is Tom Berliner. Can you hear me?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. We'll just give folks another 2 minutes or so to join the meeting. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hearing Officer Sam Bivens with the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Resources Control Board. This is a status conference on water right application 30166 filed by El Sur Ranch for a permit to appropriate water from the Big Sur River in Monterey County. This status conference is being conducted by Zoom web conference and is also being broadcast live on the AHO YouTube channel. Both the audio and video are being recorded, and we'll post files of this recording along with the Zoom-generated transcript to the AHO FTP site. The YouTube recording will also be available on the AHO YouTube webpage. If at any time you experience technical difficulties trying to communicate with us, please send an email to the AHO at adminhrgoffice@waterboards.ca.gov. AHO staff will be monitoring the email inbox. With me today are several staff of the AHO, Nicole Mullen, Skylar Anderson, Kyle Woldridge, and Rebecca Stolfus. So let's move to appearances. And to do that, I'll identify each of the entities that filed NOIs. And as I do, if you're the lead representative of that entity today, please unmute your microphone and state your name and identify any of your other colleagues who are appearing on behalf of that entity. As we proceed, please keep your microphone muted except when you're speaking so that we can minimize background noise. And we'll start with the applicant, El Sur Ranch, James J. Hill III. Mr. Berliner, you're on mute.
Thank you. This is Tom Berliner. Good afternoon. And I'm accompanied by my partner, Jolianne Ainsley, and other counsel for the applicant, Michael Harrington. And I don't know if Mark Blum is on or not, but if so, he and Michael work together.
Thank you, Tom. Mark's here.
Thank you, Mr. Berliner. And do we also have folks from Montrose Environmental on?
Hi there, this is Ken Schwartz from Montrose Environmental, and I'm joined by my colleague, Tom Engels, also from Montrose Environmental.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance.
Chris Schutz for the California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance.
Thank you, Mr. Schutz. Center for Biological Diversity.
I don't see him here today or any of my other NGO colleagues, but I'll stand in for them.
All right, so Mr. Schutz, that will take care of Ventana Wilderness Alliance, Trout Unlimited, Carmel River Steelhead Association, and Monterey Waterkeeper.
Yes.
All right, very good. Thank you. California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Good afternoon, Kathleen Miller for CDFW.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. California Department of Parks and Recreation. All right, National Marine Fisheries Service. And California Coastal Commission.
Good afternoon, Katie Butler from the Coastal Commission, and it's just me today.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Butler. Is there anyone else who intends to participate today who has not identified themselves? All right, hearing none, then we'll move to what I think is a relatively short agenda for today. I'll start off with some housekeeping. I want to move to the status of the CEQA document. We'll talk about protests and related issues. Move to any other procedural matters that the parties would like to raise, and then we'll attempt to schedule another one of these status conferences. So let's start with the housekeeping items. When we sent out the notice of status conference for this conference, our team got undeliverable messages from Steve Evans at Friends of the River and Stephen Bachman with the Department of Parks and Recreation. I believe Parks and Rec is represented by a number of other attorneys, so I'm not too worried about them. No one else from Friends of the River is on the service list. So Mr. Schutz, I suspect you occasionally talk with the folks at Friends of the River, and if you might just let them know that if they'd like to continue receiving notices in this matter, that they need to help us update the service list and let us know who we should add.
That would be fine. And what process wise do they need to do? Do they need to contact you and copy the service list? Is that the?
Yeah, if they could just email the AHO HRG office email address and copy the service list.
Okay.
We can update it that way.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
I'll
Schutz.
talk with them. Yes.
And Ms. Miller, if I could task you with making sure that Parks and Rec, I think you're the other state agency person on here, you could let them know that they also need to update the service list. I'd appreciate that.
No problem.
Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Berliner or Ms. Ainsley, I'll turn to you if we could get a, and I obviously read your status conference statement, and you may or may not have more information for me about the status of the CEQA document and a potential target date, but I'd like to hear an update about where that process is, please.
Yeah, Julianne, should I jump in here?
So yes, Dr. Schwartz is perfectly capable of telling you an update on the CEQA document. And were you interested in some other topic from our status conference statement? I think it was pretty well laid out what the status of our negotiations is with other parties. We did some preliminary meetings, and we anticipate doing further meetings with the CDFW, the Coastal Commission, and we're waiting for Parks and Recs to get back to us.
Yes, thank you. I did think your status conference was quite clear on where you guys are, so I appreciate the update. It does sound like, or I gathered from the status conference statement that there might be potentially a little bit more to report on the CEQA document, so that's primarily what I'm interested in.
Yeah, I can jump in. And so, we are making good progress. We had the road closure occur following the winter rain events, and that slowed us down in that it prevented us from conducting some resource surveys out on site. And the road is now open again since late May, and we have the surveys scheduled, and they're occurring here in July. So what that's done is basically, shifted us a couple months here in now having to recover from that road closure. So we're now, again, we're making progress. There are a couple sections that just couldn't really get completed due to that, and needed that additional field survey. So we're now targeting, I think, kind of end of September, mid-October to have this ready for the AHO. It's now early July, so that would be July, August, and September. So it's about 3 more months. And I think we're targeting for October 15th delivery.
All right, very good. We'll look for October 15th, and we'll circle back to that when we talk about scheduling another status conference. Actually, maybe just for my own edification, since I'm fairly new to this matter, and there's like 30 years of past proceedings associated with this application. I mean, I think it was filed in like 1992 or something. Ms. Ainsley, maybe this is more for you than Mr. Schwartz, but I'm sort of curious about the CEQA procedural history on this. My understanding was that there was a final EIR that was completed in May 2011. And then, subsequently there's this change petition to the application that's been filed, and obviously you need a new CEQA document for that. Is this a new or revised draft EIR? Is this a supplemental EIR that pertains totally to the change petition? I mean, where exactly are we in CEQA land procedurally?
I'll let Ken and Tom correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that what we are doing is a revised draft. Well, first we're doing an administrative draft EIR and then a revised draft EIR, because the final EIR that was before the board in 2011 did not include the settlement agreement terms nor the proposed reservoir now, which is of course a project in itself there. Yes, that my understanding is that is what we are circulating. And if I'm wrong, someone will definitely correct me.
Yeah, that's correct. And the reason why it is a recirculated revised draft EIR is because the notice of determination was not filed for the original final EIR 12 years ago or 13 years ago.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate that. As you can imagine, there's a lot of background reading to do in this proceeding. All right, let's move to protests. And I know Elser Ranch raised the issue of how we're going to be processing or rejecting protests at the last status conference statement, or I'm sorry, in the last status conference. I've had a chance to review the protests and the answers. At this point, I'm not inclined to formally reject any of the protests that were filed. They all seem to have elements, at least, that are within the scope that was identified by the prior hearing officer. So I think those, well, and the regs are not a model of clarity on how the protest process works, but my reading is that unless the State Water Board rejects them, they're accepted. So I think those are in the record at this point. I will say, to the point that was raised in the answers, at some point the applicant will finish a CEQA document and will move toward the hearing. And I suspect that, since there was a hearing that was conducted in 2011, and there are aspects of the application that have not changed since that hearing was conducted, that we will scope the hearing that occurs before the AHO accordingly. And so, as you folks think about evidentiary submissions and potentially evidentiary objections, we'll be looking to keep the scope of the hearing appropriately circumscribed. Obviously, we haven't decided what all the hearing issues will be, and I suspect we'll have a fair amount more process in the coming months and years about what that looks like. But I suspect, to the extent we'll deal with the relationship between the change petition and the original application, we'll probably sort those issues out identified by Elser Ranch in connection with evidentiary issues. Does that address the question sufficiently, Ms. Ainsley, Mr. Berliner?
Well, I guess our view was that there are certain elements that have been raised in the protest that really are either seeking to rehash or reopen things that were done in 2011, and to that extent, we feel that it would certainly benefit the record to make it clear as to the status of those essentially reopeners or do-overs, so that we're not wasting a lot of time going through material that's already been dealt with, and make it clear to folks where the remainder of this proceeding needs to focus. And I don't have any particularly strong thoughts as to when that's going to occur. But I think, if we start to venture down the path with people starting to invest a lot of time on matters that really aren't part of this aspect of the proceeding, that it would benefit everybody to get some clarity. So this may not be the appropriate time to address that, but I think we've tried to highlight that in our status conference. And so for those that are looking to go in that direction, they can see what our position is, at least on it. And then at some point, we really ought to talk about that in one of the proceedings when you deem it appropriate.
Yeah, thanks for that perspective. And I think we're on roughly the same page about that. I suspect we'll deal with scope issues later on as we get closer to the hearing, but thank you. Do any other parties want to address that issue of protest process now? All right, hearing none. Let's move to my next agenda item, which is, are there any other procedural matters that the parties would like to raise at this status conference? All right, this will be efficient then. Let's set another one. I had originally thought we'd keep to our roughly 10-week schedule and set something for roughly September 19th. Mr. Schwartz indicated that they're going to target October 15th for the administrative draft. So I'll turn to Elser Ranch. Does it, and then I'll ask the other parties to weigh in as well. Does it make sense to wait until sometime after October 15th on the assumption that we'll have an admin draft? Or would you propose sticking with the usual 10-week schedule or so?
My thought is that we're probably better off going with before the draft is issued, because once the draft is issued, I think we need to get real clarity as to an admin draft versus the normal public draft, so that we have a pathway for all the participants to understand. And what I'm assuming is, and you may have different thoughts on this, that we're going to issue an admin draft that's going to be subject to review by this group. And then we're going to issue a revised admin as necessary, and then go to a public draft, get comments from the public. So we will have already then understood what the concerns are of this group of participants, incorporated as necessary those into the public draft, so that by the time the public gets it, they're going to get a draft that's at least been reviewed by this group. That's going to take some time. I'm not sure how much that is. So that's why I'm thinking that maybe having some sort of a session in September, or depending on how Montrose feels about it, possibly even sooner if they feel it's necessary to do a double check on that. We can discuss that when it's time. That would be useful. And then I don't know how much time, Mr. Bivens, you want to give for people to respond to the admin draft. I think that's your guys' call, and you're going to have some time to put into it as well. So I think we'll be looking to you for some guidance on that. And I'm guessing you'll want to impose some timeline on us before you guys actually kick it back. So that all builds, we're building weeks here into the process. So if we could make that part of the subject of either some guidance from you just sent out, or the next status conference prior to October, I think that would be helpful.
And that makes sense to me preliminarily, and certainly we can schedule a status conference before sometime in September. And I agree, it would be helpful for me to provide some guidance on how we want to proceed with admin draft comments and the public process. Do any other parties want to weigh in on the date of the next status conference, or the issues that Mr. Berliner identified, or any other issues for the next status conference?
This is Chris Schutz with CSPA. I'd request that Mr. Berliner clarify a little bit what he has in mind for the next status conference, what information he'd seek to present and what information he'd seek to get from other parties to the proceeding, just so that I can be sure that the right people are there.
So frankly, I'm envisioning a pretty short meeting that's really administrative in the context of the timeline for the AHO as to when we should all be prepared to have admin draft comments, a final from Montrose as to when they think the admin draft will be available. Assuming it's roughly mid-October, that's great. And then just, really in a timetable of saying, okay, if an admin draft is issued October 15th, here's how much time this group, I'll just call them the participants for now. The participants have to get their comments into the draft. Here's when we expect to go to a public draft, just a timetable. And I don't even know if that takes a status conference or just an issuance from the AHO on it. So
yeah, let me tell you what I'm thinking, Mr. Schutz, and then you can respond. I think I will probably set, just for this group, a follow-up status conference for roughly September 19th. We'll get a notice out at some point in the next few weeks, and we'll ask Mr. Berliner and his team, to confirm in a status conference statement, subsequent status conference statement, whether we're on track for that October 15th admin draft. And then I'll lay out a rough proposed timeline for, when we would get comments from the parties on the admin draft, and, roughly when we would hope to go to public draft. And then I'll, invite everybody to comment on that timeline at the status conference. I suspect, as with all scheduling issues, there will be quite a few.
I thought, if I may, I was wondering if Mr. Berliner had in mind whether the folks preparing the admin EIR are going to want to ask questions or present anything substantively at the next status conference, and whether we need to be prepared to respond.
I don't have a response to your question, but I'll look to Montrose to respond to that.
I think by the September 19th timeframe, we'd really mostly be reporting on the anticipated delivery schedule, targeting still that October 15th, unless there were any other issues that were to arise that we perhaps aren't familiar with as of now. But as of now, I think we just keep working ahead on the EIR document, and we'll have an update on the 19th.
Good, and I will say, in general, for these status conferences, it's my intent to keep them mostly procedural rather than substantive. So if something comes up, Mr. Schwartz, you and Mr. Berliner can identify it in the status conference statement, and we'll take it under advisement whether we want to go that way. But yeah, in general, I do think these status conferences should be procedural and not, hearings before hearings.
Mm-hmm.
And Hearing Officer Bivens, this is Michael Harrington on behalf of the Elsur Ranch. To the point that Mr. Berliner addressed, just for my own edification, procedurally, and I apologize if this is premature, but do you envision that the non-applicant parties that are participating today would be commenting and participating in the administrative draft EIR process, or would that be something that they commented on during the public circulation of the draft EIR?
I thought Mr. Berliner's suggestion that this group of parties would, provide comments on the admin draft to be a good one. That's in line with my vision. Open to alternatives, obviously, and we can discuss that more in connection with the next status conference. But yeah, I think Mr. Berliner and I are on the same page in terms of what the comment schedule would look like for this group.
Thanks, that's helpful.
It is an odd process generally be developing a CEQA document through this process. So we'll all kind of learn as we go. All right. So with that, you might all put a hold on your calendars for a next status conference for September 19th at 1 p.m. We will get a more formal notice out in advance of that status conference, and we'll ask for a statement at least from El Sur Ranch. But with that, unless anybody else has anything for the good of the order, I think we are adjourned. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you in a few weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.